Hey all, a little bit of a different tutorial. So I made you this sort of like monster master interaction script. And what I'm going to do for this tutorial is I'm just going to go through this file and the interactivity that it provides rather than sort of build it. So you have this code. It's already linked in your week 16 tutorials. Okay, so let's just jump in. So here's what our page looks like. Okay, and oh, why are you? Okay, and so we have a couple things. We have so we have some triggers. So let me just show you what this does. So this uses the cursor. All right, so uses camera and cursor to essentially do event listeners. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the event set component and how you can use this cursor and a click or just a focus to change states, click show, hide, different things like that, okay? So for this one, if I focus and click, it gets a little larger. And then also I have a click trigger on the document for this animation here, okay? Then we have some other event set options. So on a mouse in, it changes the color, mouse out, changes another color, okay? Same thing here, mouse in, show this thing that is hidden. And then a couple other things that we have here. So on hover of these options, hover and click, it will change the background. All right, so then go over here, change the background again. And then these options here allow you to click and show something that is currently hidden. So if I focus and click, I can show something. I also have a material component on this one. So when I click, it shows the wireframe for that. Okay, and then same thing over here. When I focus and click on this option, it'll show this plane. So that's so I just tried to give you sort of like a generic, oh my goodness, wow, project that had a lot of different options for how to create interaction. Like, so for instance, you could have a whole scene built out, right? Let's say you have a whole scene on this blue plane. And you could do something in your level like, when I click on this object, hide everything that's part of here and, and show everything that's on this plane. And a really easy way to group your code, just to show you, let's say this whole plane here, okay? Let's say this whole plane you wanted to, hide or like work with it as a group. Just a really easy way to talk about that. So that's all this stuff here. That's all this stuff. You could just wrap all of that in an entity and give it an ID. Oops, it would be a entity. Okay, so entity ID middle. Okay, and I'm gonna just leave this because I'm gonna use this as an example later. But for instance, if you wanted just to demo, let's say all this stuff, this was like one little level that you built, right? All this stuff, and you wanted to stay together, you could just wrap it in an entity, right? So in a parent, and then via this ID, you can actually put a position on this so that you can end up like moving things around as a group. We could also use this to target with our JavaScript. Okay, so we have a bunch of entities and we also have a bunch of script in this file. So I'm just going to kind of walk through and break it down for y'all. So the first thing that we'll look at is, let's just take a look at this a camera, a cursor. So every file comes with a camera. Sorry, every A-frame project comes with a camera natively. But if you want to have our cursor and some of our functionality, we need to explicitly say that we want the camera, and then we put our cursor inside of the camera. So that is where this little focus is coming from. And there's actually ways that you can control this. I'll link some, exactly what this looks like. I'll link some examples for doing that. Okay, so let's first take a look at the event set functionality that's happening for these options here, and then we'll take a look at the JavaScript. So I'm using this event set component And it allows us to use browser events like mouse enter, mouse leave, to trigger interactions happening with our code. So this script tag is linked. Here's a script tag for this component. It's linked at the top of this document, so that's step 1. All right, so the event set component. So let's take a look at these options here, and let's first look at the red resize sphere. Okay, so without all this good stuff, let's not look at this. We pretty much just have a sphere. It has an ID, it has a position, a radius, and a color. Okay? And what we can do is we can call these event sets on it. All right? And you just have to give them a name. So it's just event set double underscore, and then pretty much whatever you want to name it, it just needs a name. Okay? So you kind of make up your own component. And then we say, okay, it's going to be an event, and the type of event that it's going to be is it's going to be a mouse down, and on mouse down, I will scale. Okay, so I left some comments up here for y'all. All right, so the ones that are used in this sketch are the possible event sets, possible things to happen. Mouse down is pretty much a mouse press. Mouse up is pretty much the mouse release. Mouse enter is the cursor. This thing is inside of the object. Mouse leave is cursor leaves the object, okay? So this mouse down and mouse up, this is actually your clicks, okay? So this would be the click, and then this would be the release, all right? And then again, this mouse enter is if that cursor is inside of the object, and then the mouse leave is if the cursor is outside of the object. So for this option here, okay, for the click to work, for like a click function to work, we need the cursor inside of object and then on click, okay? So this should be mouse down. All right, so let's take a look at that. We'll go down here. Okay, so here we go. We have the event is a mouse down, which is similar to a click. So on mouse down, it scales up. Okay? And then on mouse up, which is the release, right? A no click, it goes back to its original scale. Okay? And then also we have on mouse leave here. So that means that if I've clicked and then also have left the object. Remember the mouse down and mouse up, those are clicks. Mouse leaves, it just means that focus, that little cursor, has actually left the object. So you don't really need that one so much. But this is really what's scaling it. So let's maybe just get rid of this one here just so y'all can kind of see. And let's make this, we're going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so pretty much what I've set up here is the easiest way to read this would be when I click, scale it to this. When I'm not clicking on it, right, because that mouse up would mean like I'm no longer clicking, scale it to this, okay? And any attribute that you can put on a on an entity, you can be putting in this mouse up, mouse down. So for instance, we could also add, maybe let's add a color here, but we'll do it, okay, so we'll do this, and we'll do color, and we'll just grab a different color here. Cool, and then I don't think we put any punctuation at the end. Okay, so now when I click, it should also change the color. There we go. All right, so it increased it and also changed the color. If you want to change that color back, then you should also put color in the mouse up, right? Because that's the no click pretty much. And then we'll just change this back to here. Okay, Nice. All right, so again, just to reiterate, based on our comments up here, mouse down, mouse up, this is mouse pressed, this is mouse released, or this could be also known as click, no click. Okay, and those are just natively written into the, so the event set, again, just 2 underscores. It can have whatever name you want it to be, but it should be event set, 2 underscores, and then kind of whatever, this is just sort of its name. And then this is the stuff that has to be really exact. So underscore event, and then you put the properties and values. So I'm sorry, so whether it's a mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse up, mouse down, and then after that you would put the properties and values here. And I think I'm looking at another one, sorry. So the same thing though, scale and color. You could do your material in there, anything that you use as properties and values for those elements, you could put in those event sets, okay? So let's take a look at one that's like a little more complicated. So for this cylinder, I actually have a piece of text that's inside of it, but it's set to visible false currently. Okay, so I have made this a text. It has an ID of cylinder text. And so what's happening on these lines here is that I'm saying, okay, when the mouse enters, all right, again, that's going to just be the hover. I'm going to work with a target, and the target is going to be some other thing. And the target I'm working with is going to be this ID, which is this whole text piece. Okay, so this is how you can actually change something that is not. So up here, what we're changing is we're changing this actual sphere, right? We're mousing down on the sphere and then making changes to this. If you want to, in this case, mouse enter the cylinder and make it affect something different, you don't do event, you do target. Okay, so target is an event or a thing to happen for something different than if you were like clicking on a thing and affecting the thing. This is how you click on something and then affect something else. So I say target, what the target is by the ID, and then what I would like to do to it. Now, this is pretty important, the visible true. If I didn't have this in this element, then it wouldn't work. Okay, so that's pretty important to keep in mind. We can also think about, let's add one more. All right, so maybe we also want to change the color. Okay, so because I have the color here, what I'm going to do is on the mouse enter, so when I hover over it, I am also going to change the color. So I have color here, so I'll say color, and let's just say red for now. Okay, so now when I hover over the cylinder, it will also change the color of that type. Okay, let's look at one more example of the event set component, and then we'll get into some of the JavaScript stuff. So, great, let's just look at this plane. Okay, so our plane here, when we are focusing and clicking, it changes the material from just green to wireframe. So if we look at this example here, so again, you just got to give it an attribute name. You can name it whatever you want, but it should say event set 2 underscores, and then you can name it whatever you want after that, okay? And then we do, it's an event on mouse down, which again is click, so a focus on that object and click. We're going to work with the material wireframe, and it will have a wireframe. Okay, so when I click on it, it will have a wireframe. When I do the mouse up, it will no longer have a wireframe. And then also the mouse up and mouse leave, this is just sort of like a, this is a little bit like the It's similar to mouse up. It's just sort of like a catch-all. So sometimes they do this twice. You don't really. I found that you don't really need this twice. As soon as you unclick this, it will no longer show the wireframe. Okay, so that's the event set. So I would just encourage you to sort of go through those and see like how those function, and then again you kind of have this little reference up here. Okay, now what we're going to do is let's take a look at, so we kind of understand how all this stuff works. Let's take a look at our JavaScript. So let's first look at why when I click, it triggers this animation. Okay, so that's going to be right here. Okay, and so the thing that we just need to look at for this emit is this tertiary expression, which I've just copied some information about here. Okay, so this is pretty much a shorthand for a conditional statement. Okay, and so let's just walk through exactly what's happening here. So we have a variable called bounce, and we've just set bouncing, and we've set it to false. Okay, and then what we're doing is we're adding what's called an event listener onto the whole document. Okay, and the event that we are listening for is a click, and it is a function. So as you can see, you have after click, you have your function syntax. Okay, so this is really similar to the dot click from jQuery. It's just a slightly different way of writing it. Okay, so we do our add event listener. What type of listener? We're listening for a click, right? The mouse down, and then we call a function. Okay, so what's happening on this line is we're saying bouncing right here. We're updating it, and we're saying it is true now. Okay, so it is the opposite of this exclamation point means a not. So it sort of takes the exact opposite of the value. Okay, so we say we update, and we say it's now true. Okay, so when we click, we're going to start it off on false. Okay, when we click, it's going to say, okay, bouncing's now true. And then what we have here is we have a query selector for the ID of ball. Okay, so let's find that. So pretty much all we're saying is we say we declare a variable, and then we say where it is. So this is how we are just, like we did in past projects, connecting a variable to a piece of HTML. So it's in the document, it's in the HTML file. We're going to use a query selector, and then we say either what the entity name is or what the ID is. So let's find hashtag ball, because this will make sense here. So let's just look at hashtag ball. Okay, and so that's the sphere. Okay, and it has an animation on it. And so we have animation. It's going to do position. It's going to do our from, to, duration, begin, end, all that good stuff. Okay, and so the animation is actually inside of the sphere. Okay, so what we can do with this JavaScript up here, okay, is we've initially set the animation to false, so we're just turning the animation off, and then we're saying, okay, when I click anywhere, in the document, I'm going to grab that ball entity, okay, and I'm going to do an emitter, okay, so emit is like the thing that's going to happen, so it emits an event. This is the event listener, and then emit is the actual event, okay? So the actual event is going to run on the query selector, right? So ball, L is equal to the thing with the ID of ball. And then this is the shorthand for a conditional statement. There's some information about the tertiary operator up here. And so the way that this works Okay, a JavaScript operator that takes 3 operands, a condition followed by a question mark, then an expression. This is the important part. An expression to execute if the condition is true, followed by a colon, and then finally the expression if the condition is false. Okay, so here's how this works. We start the condition off at false. Then we say when we click, we're going to change it to true, and then because we've changed it to true, right, what we will get is bouncing. Is bouncing true? Yes, it's true. Then start it. If it's not true, then stop it. Okay? And so this bounce start here you go, right here. Okay? So pretty much what this allows you to do is it allows you to sort of trigger that animation based on a specific event. And our specific event is clicking anywhere in the document. I'll show you a more specific click in just a moment. But the most important takeaway from this, which is new syntax, this is a conditional statement, okay? Bouncing, whatever bouncing is, all right? Is bouncing true? If it's true, do this. If it's not, do this, okay? So as soon as I click, bouncing changes to true. Again, this exclamation point just takes whatever this is and makes it the exact opposite. So when I click, the variables turn to true. So then that will trigger my actual animation. Okay? So when I click anywhere, it triggers that animation. Okay, so let's take a look at our sky options. Okay, so we have these 2 spheres. Okay, and when we click on them up here, so a focus and a click, it allows us to change those sky images. All right, and so what's doing the work there is this attribute called setSkyTest. Okay, so this is just a sphere. It has a color, a position, and then it has an image that's stored inside of it. Okay, so both of these, what colors are these? The red and the yellow. They both have pretty much an image stored inside of it that is not being used anywhere. And we actually don't need this. Okay, and we've just given it kind of like a phony attribute name here. setSkyTest, setSkyTest. Okay, so let's take a look at the script that works with these ones here, okay? And so that's going to be this first option in the script tag. Okay, so we're just going to use A-frame. We're working in A-frame. We're going to say register a component, setSkyTest. Okay, so we're pretty much registering our own component. You don't have to worry about this so much. It's just the default. Init means we're going to initialize something, okay? So we're going to say, we're going to select the sky, okay? So we're going to select the sky with this query selector, and we're going to store it in this sky document. Anytime you see this, oh my goodness, my dog, Frank, cool it. Anytime you see this, just look for whatever is the most previous either element or ID or class. That's what this refers to. So this is actually referring to a sky, okay? So it's referring to this here, okay? So we're saying we're going to add an event listener to the sky, and we're going to add a click. So we're going to add a click to that event listener. And then what it's going to do is it is going to work with the sky, which is a sky. It's going to set the attribute, and it's going to give the sky that search attribute, right? So the SRC, which allows us to work with images, okay? So that's how we can programmatically add the SRC component onto there, onto the sky. Get rid of that. Okay, and because this component, the register component, anything that has this component will then pretty much become the click, okay? So we're registering a component. The only thing that has this component is going to be the two spheres, okay? So that sort of natively allows those to become clickable options. So when I click on either of these spheres, when I click on this one, it's going to add this image to the sky because of how I have set it up with this register component, okay? All right, so that's how that is functioning. And if you have any other questions, I think that's probably the hardest thing to understand. If you have any questions about that, we can just run through that in your individual meetings. Okay, so this last part is going to be the easiest to understand. So we're going to look at the let's see, where am I? Okay, so the tetrahedron and the plane. Okay, so when I click on the tetrahedrons, so focus and click, they're going to show a plane that they're associated with, okay? So here's the tetrahedron and here's the plane. Here's the blue tetrahedron and the plane, okay? And so this code is going to be at the bottom script because I've been having a lot more success with it at the bottom of the script because I was having some issues where it wasn't being able to find my variables. So I put the things where I needed to select not just the document, but like a really specific thing with an ID. I put that in the script down here. Okay, so let's think about the purple tetrahedron and then the purple plane. Okay, and actually this should maybe be organized like this, just to keep it a little more polished. Okay, so what we have here, let's walk through this. In our script tag, we're declaring a variable. It's called purple. We go into the document, we select a piece of HTML, and the piece of HTML we're going to select is the purple tetrahedron, this one right here. Okay? Then on the next line, what we do is off of this variable, which literally is the purple tetrahedron, we're going to add an event listener to the purple tetrahedron and say, okay, you're a click function. And this isn't that dissimilar from jQuery. The syntax is just a little bit different. Okay, and so this is just console log so that I can test if it's getting a click. Okay, so what I'm doing now is on click of the purple tetrahedron, I'm going to set up a new variable, which is literally just going to be a holder for the purple plane. So this plane here, I'm just making that variable so that I could hold it, right? Connecting a variable to a piece of HTML. And then all I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, on click of the purple tetrahedron, I'm going to select the purple plane, right? And then I'm going to put set an attribute on the purple plane, and it's going to be visible true, okay? And the reason this visible true will render out is because on the purple plane, I have visible false, okay? So the plane right now is set to visible false. When I click this, it changes it to visible true. Okay? And then we have the same code for this option over here. Okay? So click, show my plane. So let's just move through that one. Okay? So the blue tetrahedron and the plane. So let's just think about this. And so these little examples here, these are really great examples of how you can switch out your levels, right? So you can sort of focus on something, you can get rid of it, and then show something else. So this is kind of like your shows and your hides. You could also like set attribute animation, put an animation on here. Literally, color, anything that you can put, rotation, anything that you put in your entities, you can load in here, okay? So let's just move through this one just to make sure that we understand it, all right? So we're just setting up a variable and we're connecting it to a piece of A-frame HTML, all right? So that's going to be the blue tetrahedron. Frank, Okay, and then we're going to add an event listener to that blue tetrahedron, and we're adding a click event listener. That's just our console log to just make sure things worked. Okay, so inside of that function, that means, hey, when I click on the blue tetrahedron, I'm going to select the blue plane, and I'm going to set a new attribute for the blue plane. So when I click on this, I'm going to set a new attribute for the plane. It's set to visible false, so I'll set it to visible true. Now let's just try to switch this just so y'all can see. So let's say maybe I'll put it as visible false here, and then visible true here. So now that just will reverse it. So my plane, you'll be able to see the plane, right? And then when I click on something, it hides the plane. Okay, so that's another way that you can sort of like, if you think of it, right? So let's say you have a bunch of stuff. Actually, you know what? Let's run it with this. Okay, so I remember, just to sort of drill this home, we put all of that stuff in an entity that we called middle. Okay, so let's say we want to hide everything in the middle when I click on the blue tetrahedron. And so the way that we would do that here is, okay, so when I click on the blue tetrahedron, I'm going to make a new variable. So let's just call this middle plane, and I will grab that whole middle plane ID, right? So everything in the middle is wrapped in there. And then I can say middle plane, set attribute, visible, false. Okay? Because I want to turn it off. So the only thing that's missing is that I would just need to go up to this middle plane and set it the same way that I set these friends. Okay? So I'm going to set it to visible true. So I'm going to go up to that middle plane, and we're going to set it to visible true, because without visible true, I can't turn it off. So now I should be able to click on this blue, and it will hide that whole middle section. Okay, so again, that's a really good example of how you can sort of be smartly switching out your levels, right?